Kale was an ordinary engineer who lived among the wreckage of forgotten machines and drifting satellites in a remote orbital scrapyard, far from the glittering centers of galactic power. His hands were always stained with oil, his mind always filled with blueprints and repair diagrams. He was the kind of man who could rebuild an engine from memory but who never believed he would be more than a mechanic for the rest of his life. The galaxy itself was vast and filled with admirals, warriors, merchants, and rulers. Kale was not one of them. He was content to spend his days fixing broken drones, patching holes for merchant captains, and salvaging what he could from the husks of ships that once roamed the stars. One evening, as he sifted through the remains of a fractured frigate, Kale noticed a strange light cutting across the shadows. It was not the dull glimmer of metal reflecting the sun, nor the familiar glow of salvage beacons. This light was sharp, pure, and deliberate. A messenger drone descended, its hull gleaming pristine, as if it had never touched scrap nor dust. Kale frowned, for drones never came here, especially not ones so finely made. The drone hovered before him and extended a thin metallic arm, holding a sealed data crystal, bearing a crest Kale had only seen in ancient archives. He hesitated, yet curiosity gnawed at him. He accepted the crystal and slotted it into his wrist console. The moment the data flowed into his system, Kale froze. A voice deep and commanding resonated in his ears. By order of the High Galactic Tribunal, Kale Aaron, son of no house and bearer of no title, is hereby named heir to the Battleship Eternity, the largest vessel ever constructed in the history of the stars. Effective immediately, he is granted full rights of inheritance, command, and responsibility. The words hammered at his mind. He blinked again and again, certain it was some elaborate prank or an error in code, but the crest was authentic, a sigil older than most civilizations still standing. He replayed the message over and over, yet the voice never wavered. The decree was real. It named him, it called him heir. Kale dropped into the seat of his workshop, his tools scattered around him. For a long while he did not move, his heart pounded. In confusion, the Eternity was a legend, a myth spoken of by old spacers in dark cantinas. They said it was larger than any fleet. They said it could fight entire wars alone. They said it had vanished a century ago beyond the edge of charted space. But Kale knew myths never walked into the life of a scrapyard in Neretha. Drone spoke again with precise calm. You are summoned to Dock Theta. In the Arcana system, transport will arrive in 12 cycles. Decline is not permitted. Compliance is required. The message ended, leaving silence heavier than the void. Call leaned back against the cold hull of the frigate wreck, staring at the drone as it hovered patiently before him. He tried to laugh, but no sound came out. His entire life had been bolts, engines, and quiet work. Now, the galaxy's largest battleship awaited him. He felt no triumph, only a deep, unshakable dread that his life had just ended and something far greater had begun. Kale could not sleep during the 12 cycles that followed the messenger drone arrival. Every moment of rest was broken by thoughts of the decree and of the massive battleship waiting for him in the Arcanist system. He spent his nights staring at the scrap fields beyond his window, watching the cold light of stars glint off broken hulls, wondering how an engineer like him could possibly be chosen for such a destiny. When the transport finally arrived, it was not the usual cargo hauler or worn freighter he was used to seeing. It was a sleek vessel painted in white and silver, its engines humming with precision, its design flawless, the kind of ship reserved only for officials of the tribunal. The pilot was silent and offered no greeting, only a nod as Kale boarded. The interior was smooth metal and glass, with seats more comfortable than anything Kale had known. He sat awkwardly, feeling out of place, his greasy uniform a poor contrast to the clean walls around him. Every surface glowed faintly with blue light, every system perfectly maintained. The ship lifted from the scrapyard, and for the first time in his life Kale saw his home from orbit, a small collection of floating junk lit by a distant sun. It looked pitiful compared to the grand vessel carrying him away. As the transport cut across the stars, Kale pressed his face to the viewport. Space stretched endlessly dark and glittering. The galaxies he had only read about shimmered in the distance. He felt a strange pull between excitement and terror. He was no explorer, no warrior, only a man who fixed machines. Yet here he was, hurtling toward Dock Theta, the place where the Eternity was said to rest. The journey lasted only a few hours, but it felt longer every second. Kale replayed questions in his mind. Why him? Why not an admiral or a senator, or someone trained in the art of command? The thought made his stomach twist. He wondered if this was a mistake, if the tribunal had sent the wrong drone, but deep inside, he felt the weight of inevitability, as though something greater than chance was at work. When the transport emerged from hyperspace, Cale gasped. Docked. Theta was unlike anything he had ever imagined. It was not a simple station but a colossal ring orbiting a dying star. Its surface was bristling with towers, cranes, and massive hangars. The structure looked ancient yet alive, its sheer size making Cale feel as small as a grain of dust. The transport angled downward, and there it was, the eternity. Cale had heard legends, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight. The battleship was larger than entire cities. Its hull stretched beyond vision, reflecting starlight. Like a dark ocean, mountains of armor plating layered upon each other. Cannons, the size of towers, lined its flanks, and engines wide enough to swallow fleets glowed dimly at its stern. The ship was less a vessel and more a world of its own, drifting silent in the void. Cale gripped the seat, his hands trembling. His throat tightened. He had built and repaired ships all his life, but he had never seen anything like this. The battleship dwarfed everything, even the station itself, and for the first time he understood why it was said that the entity could end wars alone. A wave of awe crashed over him, followed quickly by dread, for the moment was approaching when he would have to set foot upon it, and he did not know if he was ready. The transport drifted closer, and Cale felt his chest tighten as the enormity of the eternity consumed his view. The battleship did not look like something built by mortal hands. Its surface shimmered with patterns of alloy and crystal etched into the armor like veins of light that pulsed faintly, as if the ship itself were alive. Each plate of metal looked as wide as a continent, and every gun turret loomed like a skyscraper. The docking bay doors yawned open slowly, and the size of them alone could have swallowed fleets whole. As the transport slid into the bay, Cale felt the vibration of energy shields pass over the hull, and suddenly the silence of space was replaced by the hum of internal machinery. The inside of the docking bay stretched, endlessly lit by soft white beams and dotted with drones that hovered and moved with graceful precision. No crew was in sight, no voices, no footsteps, only machines, working tirelessly without pause. They seemed to acknowledge his arrival, pausing for a fraction before resuming their tasks, as though aware that their heir had come. Kyle stepped out onto the ramp. His boots clanked against the pristine floor, metal polished so smooth it reflected his own nervous face back at him. He stood frozen in the middle of the bay, staring upward at walls that soared higher than any hangar he had ever known. He could see rows of dormant fighters lined neatly along the edges, each one armed with weapons beyond his comprehension. He was an engineer, yet his eyes failed to calculate the scale of what surrounded him. His mind screamed for him to move, but his body would not obey. He felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down, as if the eternity itself judged him. He thought of the message again. By order of the High Galactic Tribunal, you are heir to the battleship Eternity. The words repeated in his skull 1,000 times, louder than before. He was standing where no human had stood in centuries, and he did not feel worthy. The silence was unbearable. Then, a low hum rose from the walls, vibrating through the air. It was not mechanical. Not exactly. It was like a voice forming without words, a whisper of recognition. A chill ran through Cale as the floor beneath him glowed faintly, tracing lines of light around his boots, spreading outward in intricate patterns that circled the entire bay. The ship was responding to him. Cale stumbled back, nearly tripping over himself. The glow rose up the walls and into the ceiling, until the entire bay shimmered like a dome of starlight. He was no longer simply inside a battleship. He was inside something ancient, something vast, something. Watching, he clenched his fists, trying to breathe, trying to move, but he remained frozen at the threshold. Finally a sound formed in his ears, a voice, both mechanical and human, layered in tones of steel and breath. Welcome, Heir. The words echoed across the chamber, soft yet immense. Cale felt them inside his bones more than he heard them. He wanted to speak, but no sound came. He could only stare into the endless corridors ahead, knowing he had crossed into a place that would change him forever. Cale stood trembling on the glowing floor, his breath shallow, his heart a storm of panic and awe. He could not move forward, yet he could not turn back. The transport that had carried him here had already lifted away, leaving him alone inside a chamber that felt larger than entire cities. The words of the ship still echoed within him, welcome, Heir, and though the voice was not loud, it carried the weight of galaxies. Pressing into his mind, he felt as though every hidden fear he had carried since childhood was suddenly laid bare and judged. For long moments, Cale remained frozen, his boots locked to the smooth floor, as if gravity itself had conspired against him. His thoughts swirled like a maelstrom. He remembered the scrapyard, the smell of burned circuits, the feel of grease between his fingers, and the comfort of machines that never demanded more from him than patience and skill. He remembered the nights spent staring at the stars, wondering what it would be like to belong somewhere greater, and now that dream had become real. It was too vast to comprehend. The light that traced across the walls dimmed and then pulsed again, slower, calmer, as though the ship itself was breathing with him. Cale forced himself to take a single step forward. His legs felt heavy, but they obeyed. The sound of his boots striking the floor echoed through the chamber, louder than a cannon blast in his ears. Another step followed, then another, and with each one the glow expanded deeper into the corridors ahead, guiding him along a path only he could walk. As he entered the hallway, Cale realized the ship was not cold steel, but something more. The walls shifted subtly as if adjusting to his presence. Panels opened and closed without his touch. Drones floated silently out of his way, bowing their metallic frames before retreating back into hidden alcoves. He had the sense that the battleship was alive. Not in the simple way of artificial intelligence, but in a way closer to awareness, closer to thought. His fear did not vanish, but it changed, transforming into a strange reverence. Every surface hummed with power, restrained and waiting. The air itself felt charged like the moment before lightning strikes. Cale lifted his hand and brushed his fingers against the wall, expecting cold alloy. Instead, he felt warmth, faint but undeniable, as though the ship had a pulse beneath its armor. The realization made him stagger. He whispered words he could not hear, his throat dry, his voice lost. The ship answered with silence, yet it was not an empty silence. It was expectant, watching, patient. He felt it studying him, testing whether he would crumble or stand. The weight was unbearable, but Cale forced his feet to move again, deeper into the heart of the eternity. Each step carried him farther from the life he had known, and closer to a destiny he did not yet understand. His frozen fear did not vanish, but it became something else, a fire ignited by the knowledge that this ship had chosen him. Not a soldier, not an admiral, not a noble, but him. Cale, the engineer. The thought terrified him, and yet somewhere beneath the terror, a spark of defiance flickered. For, if the eternity believed he was worthy, then, perhaps he could learn to believe it too. The corridors stretched before Cale like endless arteries of light, each turn leading deeper into the heart of the eternity. He walked slowly, his boots echoing across the polished floor, his eyes darting to every flicker of light, every shadow that shifted along the walls. The ship hummed around him, a constant low vibration that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. He could not tell if it was machinery or something far stranger, but he knew he was not walking through an empty vessel. He was inside a mind. Suddenly the lights flared and consoles along the corridor came alive. Rows of ancient screens flickered to life, showing symbols and codes in languages Cale had never studied. Their meaning was lost to him, yet he felt as if they were directed at his thoughts, asking questions, demanding answers. He froze again, unsure if he should speak or remain silent. His silence did not last long. The voice returned, deeper, clearer, filling every corner of the passage. "You are heir by decree, but heirship must be proven," the eternity whispered, not with words but with resonance that pressed against his very chest. Cale swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to argue that he had not asked for this, that he was no warrior and no leader, but the ship seemed to sense his resistance, and continued, "You are not chosen for conquest, you are chosen for creation." The words sank into him like anchors, pulling his doubt into the open. Cale stared at the glowing panels, and for a moment saw images flash. Across them a barren world, cracked and lifeless, then rivers flooding, valleys, a ruined station burning in orbit, then repaired, shining, filled with light. He saw war fleets scattering before beams of impossible brilliance, and then he saw them rebuilt, their wreckage turned into vessels of peace. The vision struck him harder than any blow. He stumbled forward, pressing his hand to the nearest console. His fingers tingled with warmth as the ship responded to his touch. Lights surged outward, racing down the hallway as if acknowledging his presence. His fear shifted again, becoming something he could not name. Was it hope? Was it destiny? The thought was overwhelming, yet he could not deny what he had seen. Drones floated silently from the ceiling, forming a circle around him. Their lenses glowed red, then softened into blue. They hovered as if waiting for command. Cale lifted his hand, uncertain, and the drones mirrored the gesture, their arms shifting, tools extending then retracting, as if ready to serve. He dropped his hand and they paused, motionless as statues. He realized then that the eternity was not merely greeting him, it was testing him. It was showing him the scale of power at his fingertips, power to destroy and power to rebuild. Voice echoed again, softer now. A weapon can end life, a builder can save it. Which will you be? Heir felt his knees weaken. He was an engineer. He had always believed in fixing what others threw away, in breathing life back into broken machines. Perhaps that was why the ship had chosen him. Perhaps the tribunal had known the eternity required not a destroyer but a oracle. Straightened his back, drawing a deep breath. He still shook with fear, but he spoke at last, his voice quiet yet firm. I am not a soldier, but I am not afraid to build again. The drones pulsed blue in response, and the hall blazed with light as though the ship itself had smiled. Heir followed the corridor deeper, and the ship guided him with waves of light that rippled along the walls. Each glow seemed to pull him toward the core, and with every step the air felt heavier as if filled with the weight of memory. The battleship was awake now, no longer silent but humming with purpose. Every panel flickered alive as he passed, showing fragments of records that seemed centuries old. He glimpsed admirals in regal uniforms giving orders. He saw fleets forming around the eternity. He saw battles where entire armadas vanished into fire, and then silence, all of it played like ghosts projected on glass, each image vanishing as quickly as it appeared. Heir felt unease curl through him, his stomach twisted at the sight of so much death. For the first time he wondered if he could ever control such a vessel. The voice of the ship returned, strong but calm. You see, the memory of what I was forged in war, was used for conquest, but I am more than the battles I was forced to fight. He heard sorrow in the tone, though it was machine and code. It carried something deeper, something close to regret. The passage opened into a massive chamber, shaped like a cathedral. Its ceiling stretched so high he could not see its peak. Beams of light arched overhead, and at the center stood a column of crystalline alloy rising like a tower. The surface pulsed with energy, blue, white, and gold flowing through it. In veins of light, Heir approached slowly, his breath uneven. He knew, without being told, that this was the heart of the ship. The voice grew louder, resonating from the column itself. I am the eternity, and I have waited. Heir. He stopped cold. The ship had spoken his name, not the title of heir, but his name and hearing. It, spoken by something so vast, shook him to his core. He placed a trembling hand on the surface of the crystal, and warmth spread into his arm. His thoughts filled with clarity, as if the ship were looking directly into his soul. Why me? Heir whispered, though his words were barely sound. The column pulsed in response. Because you are not driven by hunger for war. You are a builder, a restorer. I was not meant only to destroy, I was meant to preserve. Yet those who commanded me saw only a weapon. They used me until I could fight no more, and then they sealed me away, waiting for one who could see beyond the fire. Heir felt his throat tighten. The visions returned clearer this time. He saw ruined planets restored into green worlds. He saw fleets disarmed and remade into ships of exploration. He saw children walking beneath domes of light built from wreckage. He realized the eternity carried within it not just weapons but technologies forgotten by most of the galaxy, machines capable of creating life where there was none. Still the weight crushed him. He was just Heir, a man from a scrapyard, not a leader, not a hero. Yet as he stood with his hand pressed to the crystal, he felt something shift deep inside. He was terrified, but beneath that terror, there was a spark of belonging. The ship had chosen him, and its voice softened. You are not ready yet, but you will be, and together we will decide what future the galaxy will inherit. Heir stood with his hand on the glowing column, and his heart pounded in his chest. The words of the eternity echoed in his skull. You are not ready yet, but you will be. He wanted to believe them, but doubt clung to him like iron chains. His mind returned to the scrapyard where he had spent his life mending what others discarded. He remembered nights when he failed repairs, when ships collapsed under his hands. He remembered every mistake, every moment when he had not been enough. Now he was asked to guide the largest battleship in existence, and his doubts grew heavier with every thought. The chamber darkened slightly, as though the ship sensed his turmoil. The voice of the eternity came again, not harsh but steady. You question yourself. You wonder why you were chosen. The truth is simple. I do not require a warrior. I do not require a conqueror. I require one who sees value where others see ruin. That is who you are, Heir. That is what you must embrace. Heir shook his head, his voice cracked. I cannot lead fleets. I cannot command soldiers. I am just an engineer who fixes machines, not someone who saves galaxies. The words spilled out raw and desperate, yet the ship did not retreat. Instead, the column of crystal pulsed with brighter light, filling the room with warmth like a rising dawn. Then visions formed around him, but these were not memories of the past. They were possibilities. He saw himself standing on the bridge of the eternity, his hands steady, his voice strong as fleets gathered around him, not in fear but in hope. He saw entire systems once broken flourishing again because the ship under his command had brought life instead of fire. He saw himself older, wiser, guiding not through force, but through compassion. The visions faded, leaving Cale shaken. He whispered, "But what if I fail? What if I am not strong enough?" The eternity replied with a tone that resonated through his bones. "Strength is not in the absence of fear, but in the choice to act despite it. You are not asked to be flawless, you are asked to be true to who you are." Cale closed his eyes. He remembered every broken machine he had pieced back together, every wreck he had salvaged and restored, every moment of patience, every refusal to give up even when others would have walked away. Perhaps that was what the ship saw in him, not perfection but persistence, the kind of strength that rebuilt instead of abandoned. As he opened his eyes, the drones descended again, this time forming shapes around him. They projected holograms of schematics, engines, reactors, weapons. Cale recognized parts of them, and others he could barely comprehend. The eternity spoke again. "This is my test. Learn me, understand me, not as a weapon but as a machine that carries life within its frame. Only then will you be worthy." Cale felt his fear twist into something different. A challenge lay before him, one that matched his skill not in battle but in craft. He drew a deep breath, his hands steadying for the first time. Since he had arrived, perhaps he was not a commander yet, but he was an engineer, and in that he would not fail. The eternity pulsed once more, as though in agreement, and the test began. Cale spent what felt like hours wandering through the hidden chambers of the eternity, guided by drones that moved in silence. Each chamber revealed something unexpected, and each discovery stripped away another layer of the myths he had heard about. The ship, he had been told, the eternity was only a weapon, a machine built to crush fleets and reduce planets to ash. Yet the truth unfolding before him was entirely different. The first chamber he entered was vast and filled with rows of tall machines, their surfaces glowing with faint green light. At first Cale thought they were engines, but when he examined them closely, he realized they were life support generators, not for soldiers but for ecosystems. The readings displayed projections of soil, restoration of air, purification of water, cleansing. The ship carried the means to heal entire planets scarred by war. Cale touched the panel and streams of data poured into his console, explaining processes for reversing radiation and rebuilding fragile atmospheres. His throat tightened as he realized this ship had been designed to restore, not to obliterate. The second chamber opened into what looked like an industrial foundry, but instead of forging weapons, it was configured to recycle debris. Massive arms reached into containers filled with metal scraps and broken hull fragments, transforming them into raw materials. Drones carried the output into storage units where Cale saw schematics for structures not of war but of settlement. Domes, schools, power plants. The eternity could harvest the wreckage of battle and turn it into the foundation of life. Again Cale felt his chest rise and fall rapidly. The images the ship had shown him before now made sense. This was no ordinary warship. It was a vessel of guardianship disguised by those who had once used it for conquest. Perhaps its builders had meant it to defend, but over centuries its purpose had been twisted into legend. Its power was undeniable, yet buried within that power was hope. The voice of the ship returned, softer than before. "Do you see now, Cale? I was not created to end life, but to preserve it. I carry weapons, yes, for I must defend, but my greatest strength is in what I can rebuild. You are the one who understands this truth. You are the one who can carry it forward." Cale ran his hand along the warm surface of the foundry controls. His doubts did not vanish, but a different weight filled his heart, the kind of weight born of responsibility. He whispered, barely audible, "I thought I was not enough, but maybe this is not about being enough, it is about refusing to give up." The eternity pulsed with golden light as though agreeing as the drones guided him deeper. Cale entered one final chamber unlike the others, a massive garden stretched within sealed domes filled with trees, flowers and rivers glowing under artificial skies. Birds fluttered between branches and small creatures moved across soft grass. Cale stopped, frozen in awe. This was proof undeniable. The eternity carried entire worlds within it waiting to be released. Wherever life had been lost, he stood in silence, tears burning at the edge of his eyes. For the first time since his arrival, he felt not fear but belonging. He was not chosen to destroy, he was chosen to heal, and that truth gave him the strength he had been searching for. Cale stood within the garden chamber, his hands brushing against leaves that felt real. Though he knew they grew under artificial skies, he listened to the soft rush of water flowing through narrow streams, and the quiet song of birds echoing above him. The sound filled him with a peace he had not felt since childhood. It was then he understood the full weight of what had been given to him. This ship was not just a fortress, it was a sanctuary, a seed of rebirth waiting to be planted among the stars. He lingered there for a long while, letting the silence settle inside him. When he finally stepped away, the drones guided him toward the bridge. At every turn the corridors lit the path, as though the eternity itself anticipated his movements. The air grew heavier, the hum of the engines deeper, until at last he entered a chamber so vast it made even the docking bay seem small. It was the command bridge, the place where countless decisions had once shaped the fate of empires of consoles, stretched in perfect arcs, each one glowing faintly with dormant systems. The great window at the front of the bridge was a wall of transparent alloy opening to the endless night of space. Stars glittered beyond like scattered diamonds, and Kale felt as if the whole galaxy had turned its eyes upon him. He walked forward slowly, his boots echoing against the floor, until he reached the central platform, where a single chair waited. The voice of the eternity filled the chamber, softer now, like a whisper in his ear. You are the heir, Kale, and this is your place, not as a tyrant, not as a destroyer, but as a guardian. The galaxy has long forgotten my true purpose. They will remember through you if you choose to accept. Kale stared at the chair. His hands shook as doubt returned one final time. Could he sit here? Could he bear the responsibility of so many lives? He thought of the scrapyard, where he had grown up among rust and ruin. He thought of the nights spent fixing broken machines when everyone else had given up. He thought of the visions he had seen of ruined worlds restored and children walking under skies of light. He drew a deep breath and lowered himself into the chair. The bridge came alive at once. Lights flared across every console, engines roared through the bones of the ship shields, activated with a sound like thunder, and the stars beyond brightened as though welcoming him. The eternity pulsed with golden light, and its voice spoke again, clear and strong. Welcome, Kale, guardian of eternity. May your hands rebuild what has been broken, and may your heart never waver. For the first time since receiving the decree, Kale did not feel frozen. He sat tall, his gaze steady upon the stars. He was still an engineer, still the boy who had fixed machines in a forgotten scrapyard, but now he was also heir to the galaxy's largest battleship, not as a weapon of war but as a beacon of hope. He whispered quietly to himself, I accept, and the ship answered, not with words but with light spreading outward like dawn across the void, as the legend of the eternity began anew.